everyone, I'm Reverend Ingrid. Welcome to Children's Church at Home. This is the last Children's Church Home video before our summer break, and so there's lots of other ways to grow as disciples without me and I'm sure you can find fantastic ways, and if you need support, just email me and I will give you lots of ideas. Now, let's get the treasure chest and get started. Oh, it's so heavy today. Let's see what's in here. Well, first of all, we have our green cloth. Green, just like the tree above me and the grass below me. Green is that time of year in the church where we know it is time to grow as disciples. We are growing in God's love and learning all about the stories. Do you have your candle ready? Here's mine. There once was a man who said such amazing things and did such incredible things that people began to follow him. But they didn't exactly know who he was, so they just had to ask him. And he said, do you know it? I am the light. Now, today, I have something in the treasure chest to show you. You ready? What is that? What is this? Can you tell? Yeah, it's pie. Why do I have pie in the treasure chest? What does pie have to do with church? Well, I'm going to read you a story. I'm going to get closer so that you can see all the pictures. And then I'm going to ask again, what does pie have to do with church? Let me get out the story. You may know this one. Come and check out this story called Enemy Pie. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend, Stanley. I do not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood, but as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up on my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, Dad said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Do you know what squinting is? Look really close and squinting. He squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said, satisfied. You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would go into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he said he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing all morning. He gave it right back to me. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me. And all the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. I smelled... Wait. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. As far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went in and asked Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he had made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like a plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out. Or maybe it made their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible, it was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross, and he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house, and I knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said, and he came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighborhood girls. But we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell Dad that since he'd worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game, just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my treehouse. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him in. And if Jeremy wanted in, can we go in it? He asked. I knew he was going to ask me that. But he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang. And he did have me over for lunch. And he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off my wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and then when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him. Somehow he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner. My favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. Dad, I said, it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me and he passed one to Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at the pie. My dad never makes pie like this. It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy, don't eat the pie. It's bad. I think it's poisonous or something. Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. I had saved his life. I was a hero. If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why has your dad already eaten half of it? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful. And that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing, Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny bite. Enemy pie was delicious. After dinner, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out or their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy. The end. Now, do you remember the question I asked? What does pie have to do with church? Well, what does that story have to do with church and growing as a disciple, growing in God's love? What do you think? Do you think it's because sometimes we have treats after church? No, I don't think that's why. Do you think it's because Jesus told us to love our enemies? That's it. I'm going to pull out the Bible. Do you remember the Bible's divided into 2? There's the Old Testament and the New Testament. And in the New Testament, the stories of Jesus are found in the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There's 4 of them. And so today we're looking at a story in Luke. It's in chapter 6, and it starts at verse 27, and it says, I say to you, love your enemies. Wow. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you, and pray for those who hurt you. Do you think that's an easy thing to do? I don't think so either. Pray for those who hurt you. Wow. Has anyone ever hurt you? I mean, it's important to tell your grown-ups if that happens, or a safe grown-up that you trust, like me or Reverend Ryan. But we can also pray for the people who hurt us. We can learn to love our enemies. In the book, how did the little boy learn to love his enemy? He got to know him, didn't he? He didn't stay an enemy after that. Now, today for our offering, I've got my offering plate and stones here. and invite you to take your imagination stone, just like every week, bloop. And instead of something that we're grateful for, I'm going to invite you to think about someone that maybe you've hurt, or someone that has hurt you. And I want you to hold the rock in their hand. This doesn't mean that necessarily you agree with what they've done, or even that you like them. But we can learn to love our enemies. And so I invite you to pray for someone that you've hurt, about what you can do to make it right, or that they would be loved and happy. And if you're the one who's hurt, you can pray for the one who hurt you. Not that they get away with it, not that they have no consequences, but pray for them that they may know love. Because usually it's hurt people who hurt people. So I'll invite you to put that person back in the offering plate. And we'll offer the prayer together. Oops. Dear God, bless these offerings, send peace on earth. Amen. Now, are you ready to receive your blessing? Get in position, however you want to be. Are you ready? Dear, precious, beloved child of God, may you always know that no matter what, God loves you, I love you, and there's nothing you can do to make God love you more. There is nothing you can do to make God love you less. God, Amen. Enjoy your summer.